Hi, welcome to Austin, Texas for a special edition of Money Talks America. I'm Sean Snaith, Director of the Institute for Economic Competitiveness in the College of Business Administration at the University of Central Florida. We're here in Austin with AUBER, the Association of University Business and Economic Research. And here with me today is a special panel who are participating in this year's annual conference. Keith Ware is Director of the Center for Business and Economic Research and a member of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas Economics Department faculty. His specialties include economic impact analysis, econometric modeling, feasibility analysis, and survey research. Next to Keith is Janet Hara. She just celebrated her first anniversary as Senior Director of the Center for Economic Analysis and Development at Northern Kentucky University. Hara came to NKU after 21 years of experience as an applied economist, including 10 years as director of a similar center at Wichita State University. Next to Janet is Tom Witt. Tom Witt is Associate Dean for Research and Outreach and Director of the Bureau of Business and Economic Research at West Virginia University. Dr. Witt specializes in regional economics, econometric modeling and forecasting, energy and public utilities, and the West Virginia economy. Next to Tom is Rich Wabakin. Rich wears many hats, and among them, he's Executive Director of the Business Research Division at the Leeds School of Business at the University of Colorado at Boulder. His responsibilities include developing an annual consensus forecast of the Colorado economy, and incidentally, he's also an Associate Dean. The U.S. economy is just emerging from one of the worst recessions in many, many decades. I'd like to talk to each of our panelists here about the state of their state's economy and how they're faring as the national economy begins its turnaround. Keith Ware, how is Nevada faring through all of this?
Nevada has the second highest unemployment rate in the United States. We have an index of leading indicators that matches the national in terms of its scope. The economic indicators are for continuous decline in Nevada. That is to say, we do not see shoots of economic recovery yet, but we're expecting sometime next year the southern Nevada economy, Las Vegas and Reno, will begin to turn back up.
Is there any signs of the green shoots, if you will, in the housing sector? Because I know that's been one of the ground zeros. There's several of them.
Nevada is one of the 4 states that's had a significant housing bubble, and we have seen little, if any, significant improvement. We continue to have a large excess supply of housing units and a very slow adjustment that occurs in the housing market. We do not expect to see recovery in the housing market for the next year or two.
We're going to come back and touch on some of those issues later, but one more thing before I move on, gaming and tourism. Is there any sign of stabilization there?
If you're in Las Vegas on a weekend, you're going to see almost a full house. The significant decline has been in the middle of the week, which is the business travel market.
Great. Janet, now you've recently moved, just a year in Kentucky from Kansas. Did you jump out of the frying pan and into the fire? How would you compare those 2 states, and how is Kentucky faring today?
Well, I think a couple of notable differences in that the part of Kentucky that I'm from, very dependent on autos. Obviously, autos has been extremely hard hit. Kansas was more of a Midwestern state, kind of a nice steady growth. Aircraft was their industry. It has not been as hard hit as autos. Kentucky has had relatively high unemployment rate. The number of employed has been declining for 20 straight months. So it's been a tough time in Kentucky.
We know there's bluegrass. Is there any green shoots in the economy?
Not that I've seen anytime soon.
Okay. Tom, how about West Virginia? You might know I was born not know that I was born a coal miner's daughter, actually. Oh. So yeah, I'm familiar with your state. Actually, I'm from Pittsburgh, so I'm very, very close to the border. And how is West Virginia faring through all this?
Actually, we fared relatively well. We tend to lag behind the national economy, so our latest unemployment rate was 8.1%, seasonally adjusted 8.9%. So we're down below the national economy in terms of the level of unemployment. We're down 27,000 jobs from a year ago. Most of the job losses have been in the goods producing sector. Last year we had record production in the coal industry, and we've had significant declines in that, which we can talk further about. But we also have seen some deterioration in other sectors of the economy, particularly manufacturing, since we've been hit hard by the declines in the steel industry and some of the other metal fabrication. But we're going to tend to lag behind the national economy coming out of this recession, so we anticipate the unemployment rate to continue to increase.
How high do you think it'll get in West Virginia?
Well, it probably will definitely go above 9. We have some big uncertainties, particularly as it relates to federal energy policy that might drive it higher.
Okay, well, that's something we do want to touch on, and we want to talk a little bit about policy at the federal level and what it means for all of our states' economies. Before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about Colorado. Other than runaway Mylar balloons flying over the state, what's happening there, Rich?
Colorado went into the recession dramatically later than the U.S., not till actually the fourth quarter of 2008. And so we had been actually had positive job growth for 2008, but in the last 12 months we've shed about 110,000 jobs. We went into a very, very precipitous decline that has been very broad-based to tourism industry, the energy industry, professional and business services. It's been a wide array of job loss. Even with all of that, we're at about 7.7% unemployment, so we're still in pretty good shape, but we went into it in very good shape. So the question for most Coloradans is, do we come out in sync with the U.S. economy? Do we lag as West Virginia? Actually, I think a lot of people believe we'll come out in front or in sync with the U.S. economy.
Excuse me, do you think you're at peak unemployment now, or you still have a little more to drift with the nation as a whole?
Unemployment's a lagging indicator, so I think it might go up a little bit, but I would say into low 8s. I mean, I don't think we're going to go that much higher at this point.
Are there any sectors that are still growing or have continued to grow throughout this recession?
Well, you take the last 12 months when we've had so much job loss, the two that are still positive job generators are education and health services, private education and private health services, and that's growing at a pretty healthy clip. And then government is still positive at this point. But this is an area for our state, and I think probably many other states, that we don't see government being able to sustain job growth going forward. We think state and local governments are going to have a very difficult time with budget cuts.
Is that true across the panel here? Do you see the state and the local government funding crisis? I mean, we got a bit of a Band-Aid through the Stimulus Act, the Federal Stimulus Act, and patch some of these budget holes. But are these holes going to open up and get wider, Keith?
Our two major revenue sources is gaming revenue and the sales tax. And month over month, we're seeing continuous double-digit decline. We've got a financial crisis that is still in front of us at the state level.
Janet?
I think at the state level we'll see furloughs. You know, obviously going to see, we've already seen wage freezes. I think we'll see furloughs, and at some point we're going to start seeing job losses. We're already seeing job losses at the city and county level. Even with some of the stimulus money that's been trying to help, it's not enough.
Tom?
We've used the stimulus to backfill some holes in the state budget, but we've had some significant deterioration in severance tax revenues as well as gaming revenues. We've had increased competition on the gaming front from states around West Virginia, and in fact this is the first year in a number of years that we've had a decline in gaming revenues. So I think in terms of planning ahead, as we go out to FY 2011, we're going to see a 5 to 10% cut in our state budget simply because of falling revenue yields.
Rich, same pattern?
We've already seen furloughs at the state level. My concern right now is more at the local level, which is so dependent on retail sales tax, and it seems to be recovering. Year over year, percentage declines are actually getting smaller as we go months ahead. So it's going to really depend on whether the consumer comes back for us.
Let's talk a little bit about policy at the federal level. We've seen a number of actions taken by the federal government. We had a huge stimulus act rushed through in a matter of days and signed into law. To date, depends on who you talk to, 20% maybe of that $787 billion has actually hit the economy. I'd like to know, have you each seen in your states any impact, aside from those budgetary patches that we just talked about, any impact on the economy from the stimulus package to date? I'll start with Rich this time.
The last 2 months, we've started to see significant road projects and other infrastructure investments being put in place, and we have, at least as reported, the #1 website for actually reporting the impacts of the of the stimulus money, and it really has added quite a bit in the last 2 months to economic activity. In addition, there's been quite a few investments in renewables, in renewable energy industry, which is a very strong part of our economy, small but strong. So we think now we're actually seeing some initial effects, but you know, we can all be, I think, extremely critical of how long it took for this money to come to the table.
I think you're right. Tom?
We're seeing it in the highway construction. Our state road fund has been under a lot of fiscal stress simply because the change in the way in which motorists are driving these days in reaction to high fuel taxes and increased fuel efficiency. So we have the signs. We're one of the states that has the signs at the highway projects that show the stimulus money at work.
The signs are up, but are the shovels turned in the dirt?
Oh, they're turning the dirt. In fact, I get stopped by flaggers all the time.
Well, that's a good thing these days, isn't it? Janet?
I think some of it is you have to, how do you define success for the stimulus package? I mean, we had programs like the homeowners tax credit, $8,000. You have cash for clunkers. I mean, it did work and it increased housing sales. It did work and increased auto sales, but it's a short-term fix. It's not addressing long-term demand. So I'm not sure, it depends on how you define success for those. They were short-term bursts, but they're not fixing the long-term underlying problems in the economy.
If you take the state-specific distribution of funding from the highest to the lowest, we're second from the bottom. So we really haven't seen much in the way of economic stimulus from Washington. But of course, we're in the West Coast. It's a long ways from Washington, and others have between here and Washington, or between Nevada and Washington, have taken all the money.
I just might mention, Janet mentions the cash for clunkers, and I think we can all criticize it, but in our case, we've estimated that the trade-up in automobiles in terms of increased fuel efficiency is going to cost our state road fund in terms of $300,000 a year and less than fuel taxes that they'll be generating long term. So it sounds like a good idea in the short run. It stimulates short-term sales. But in the long run, because you get more fuel-efficient vehicles, it undermines the traditional method of funding highways, which is through a motor fuel tax.
Unintended consequences.
That's
Keith,
right.
did you want to weigh in?
I hear Tom, but I think that yes, there's the unintended consequences, but it's a short-term effort, and it's critically important that we get through the short run to get the economy going again. So yes, we've had problems with it. Yes, it's not big, but this is going to be a very different recession. It's the most depressing recession since the 1930s, and we may have found out that the stimulus package, with its emphasis on a longer profile of spending, may help us now as we go into the next year or year and a half.
What about the mix of the Stimulus Act? I mean, that's been one of the things that was criticized. It was rushed through, very 1,000-page bill, 3 days, signed into law. Some people said there should have been more investment if we're going to run $1.5 trillion deficit.
Remember, in order to get the package through, that was the tax rebates, and we know that the multipliers off of that are substantially less than for infrastructure spending. So yes, the political decision of that made it a less effective program than it could otherwise have been.
Yeah, not to mention the backfilling of government and also the extension of unemployment benefits.
Right.
But you know, we would be laying a lot more people off at the university level right now if we didn't have the backfill of the stimulus package. So it certainly has had a retention as opposed to job creation impact, and you really have to put that into the equation. All of that said, we haven't really invested in infrastructure since Eisenhower in this country, and we desperately need to. So, you know, I think a lot of us were hopeful we were going to see those big infrastructure investments to really make the U.S. more competitive over the long run.
And then you have to ask yourself, how bad would it be if we had not extended the unemployment benefits? How much quicker and how much deeper would the foreclosure problem have been?
Let me turn back to government finance at the state and local level, because this is something I think all of us are going to spend a lot of time talking about over the next couple of years. In Florida, there's a notion that government is too big, that they spend too much, and there's a few politicians that are trying to push a cap on the rate of growth of government spending that might be linked to population growth or to inflation. Now, I know Colorado's had something like that in place for how long?
Probably about 15 years now since.
How's it been working?
Well, it's had some rough patches. I think the conceptually, a lot of people can align with the fact that untethered government expenditures could grow at far faster rates than the average business person or citizen might like. And the concept of the bill in our state is that it limits it to inflation plus population growth, so it's a combination factor. But we didn't craft the original bill quite correctly, and we didn't allow for things like rainy day funds. So when we have gone through economic cycles, 2001 recession and now this recession, we've had to really slash government expenditures dramatically, and that has had a lot of pain. Right now, cutting education budgets, we're cutting health support budgets, we're cutting prison budgets, I mean, just across the board. So I guess I would say if you're planning on doing something like that, I don't think it's necessarily a bad piece of policy, but think carefully about, building up reserves, having a rainy day fund so you can kind of keep a steady stream of expenditures over time.
In Nevada, we had the governor was opposed to any revenue increases, and the legislature, which meets every other year for 100 days, fashioned a compromise in which they did in fact use the stimulus money as well as to raise taxes in order to meet the state's financial obligation. We have a supermajority requirement, so it took 2/3 of the legislature, and both Republicans and Democrats came on board and to reach a compromise. So governments can get themselves into trouble, but governments can also work to solve problems.
Janet, Tom?
Well, I think, we all like to say, we like to bash the government, but the fact is that we don't want them to cut these services. We want our kids to have a good K-12 education. We want our kids to go to a good in-state college. We want to have health care for those people who don't have insurance. Those things all cost money. We want to extend the unemployment benefits. Somebody's got to pay for that, and it's got to be government services. So I think there's services that people are willing to pay for. It's the services that they know there's waste, and they just want you to figure out how to cut it. But as we all know, that work for big bureaucracies, that's a whole lot easier said than done.
In a crisis like this, when we see pension plans going under and major manufacturing firms going bankrupt, here's your local government bureaucrat gonna retire in a pretty nice fashion compared to medical coverage included, compared to someone from the private sector. And is this fomenting some of this anti-government?
Well,
Go ahead. I'll follow up.
I was going to say, it's interesting you mentioned this because we just had a legislative report that looked at all the state vehicles that were being driven by officials and found out that many of them were using them for non-business purposes, and they weren't reporting the taxable amount, including several elected officials. So it's turned into quite a big brouhaha, and that's not even involved with their pensions, health benefits, or anything else. It's just abusive use of state vehicles is really giving some state employees a bad name right now.
In our state, we have a very centralized revenue system, and monies go up to the state, and then the state reallocates money back to counties and cities. And what we found is there has been confrontation about that formula with the belief that the state government doesn't have as much money as the county government has. So we've had that problem, as well as the problem you've mentioned about retirement systems, and so there is that contention in our state, and was likely to continue for some time, given the arrangement of our fiscal system.
I think there's certainly some resentment to the executive branches of government, but right now in our area, we're looking at cutting police and fire, furloughing police and fire. And at that level of government, the public definitely does not want them to be cut. Right. So I don't think you can make it a blanket statement about all government employees. I think it depends. It's what they consider the fat cats, whoever that might be. Right.
Now, if you talk to some of our colleagues from California at the meeting today, they'll talk to you about firemen and police officers that using overtime make $300,000 a year, $400,000 a year.
That's not happening in my state.
Well, and it's not happening in mine either, but you do see those sort of core government employees that everyone, we want our house to be put out when it's on fire, and we, want the bad guys in jail. But some of that is being abused in some states across the country.
Well, one of the things that we're seeing is a real tension between local and state government on the construction of their financial statements to reflect the post-retirement benefits. These have not been reported under government accounting requirements, and now are being required to show up as liabilities on local governmental balance sheets, and the local governmental entities are really rebelling against this from a financial point of view, because they fear it's going to undermine the ratings of the bonds that they might issue.
I think there's another aspect of that to follow up on, and that we've seen a lot in the press about contentious attitudes toward Wall Street, that somehow we are bailing out the people that created the problems, and then we're bailing out Detroit, Michigan, you know, but the president is telling people not to take a vacation and come to Las Vegas. So there's a certain element from our perspective about this whole question about the winners and losers, and it shows really in these times with economic difficulty.
I do have to say, though, I think government employees sometimes are out of sync with the real economy, and we've had a couple of very contentious issues in Colorado, one with the police, one with the school, 2 different school districts, where people refused to give up their pay raise of 1 or 2% for the year in this economic environment, and there's zero sympathy for that right now. I mean, people are losing jobs all around you. There's zero sympathy for the government employees, and then they start in immediately, and the next thing is, well, you've got this defined benefit plan. You know, we don't have a defined benefit plan. We have a defined contribution plan, and so it just builds and it builds and it builds right now.
I mean, do you think there's a day coming where the government is going to have to start behaving more like the private sector, or will these retirements at age 50 with this defined benefit pension and health care for life, will that always be part of a government employee's compensation? What do you think?
My view on that is that we essentially have inefficiencies in government, we have inefficiencies in the private sector, and we have a contentious relationship all along. We're not going to get rid of all of the inefficiencies in government. We're not going to get rid of the inefficiencies in the private sector, but we're going to hopefully tack within some range of acceptability.
I think we've already seen that. I mean, most faculty, where I come from, the faculty don't have a state pension anymore. They have a 403B that they make their contributions, and it goes up and down with the stock market. So I think you've already started to see some of those changes.
Is it going to happen, I mean, does it have to happen at the federal level for it to take place at the local levels as well? Or, I mean, is it going to have to start at the top before it gets the way down, or is it going to go bottom up until there's pressure on the feds?
No, I think it's actually going to be bottom up. I mean, I think the closer you are to government, the more you feel like you can control it. And, I see this thing with the state pension plans. The universities aren't the issue in terms of defined benefit. It's the state employees in Colorado. It's the Colorado public employees. And people are incentivized in that system to retire at 50 years old with really high payout rates, and you look at that and you just say it's so out of sync with the way how long people are living, how the world is running. It's just so out of sync. So I actually think there will be a lot of pressure to change that over time. And I will say personally, I think it would be fantastic because it would encourage people to save more, not in the public sector, and they should be saving more in the private sector too.
I mean, there's a lot of things that we're learning about behavioral economics in terms of incentives and disincentives that I think are coming to the forefront that allow us to do some restructuring of some of these government plans.
Let's talk a little bit in the moments that we have remaining about what the future might hold. Where do you see your state going in the next year, 2 years, 5 years? When will it recover fully to, in your opinion, to the peak employment levels prior to the recession? How long is that going to take? Let's break out the crystal balls.
Nevada, of course, in the last 20 years, it was the fastest growing state. So we've had a long period of economic prosperity. But it's very clear that we're facing a lot of competition elsewhere, and that was among a number of business people, was the belief that we were immune to a national recession. So we're going through a difficult period of reassessment. We have an economy dominated by one industry. That industry is dependent upon discretionary spending. We've seen a sharp economic decline. We're not sure that the future holds the prosperity that we've seen in the past. And one of the things that's happening is a review of economic development. It's put back on the table, rethinking that we should diversify our economy. Our economy 3 or 4 years ago was exactly the opposite of Michigan. And today, both of those economies are in a very weak position because they're dominated by one industry. So I see Nevada slow recovery coming out of this and a rethinking of what the future will hold for us and what we should be doing in terms of the economic dimension.
Janet?
Well, I think in our state, and I think probably in a lot of other states, it's going to be a long, slow recovery, particularly on the job side. I think in our state, the urban areas are going to recover more quickly than are the rural areas. I think they are going to be very slow to recover. A lot of those, particularly the low-end manufacturing jobs that were the major employers in these areas, if they ever come back, it's going to be 3 or 4 years down the road. So I think there will be it's not going to be the state overall, it's going to be different pockets of the state that are coming back at different rates.
West Virginia?
We're going to have a very slow recovery too. Our biggest issue that we're facing right now at the state level is where the federal government will be going on cap and trade. That potentially has the ability to take out significant amounts of coal production. We're already down 17 million tons of coal from last year, and we're projecting that our coal production in the absence of cap and trade is going to be basically at 140 million tons a year for the next year or two. Cap and trade has the potential to really take out more coal production. On the other side, we have the growth of natural gas production through the development of the Marcellus Shale play. But what we're really facing long term is an aging population that has relatively low levels of educational attainment, low levels of labor force participation that are aging in place. And that's going to be the biggest long term drain on economic growth in West Virginia.
Rich?
Well, I want to be more positive than my colleagues, although I totally agree that it's going to be a slow recovery and jobs are going to be hard to come by. We happen to have a pretty significant concentration in technology that seem to be moving us along. We actually think we'll be one of maybe a handful of states, maybe 10 states next year with positive job growth. So we really do have us coming out a little bit earlier. And overall, if you ask me for a projection of how many years, I'd say even in a good environment for us, at least 3 years to get back to where we were at peak. And I don't disagree with some of the national pundits who are saying 5 years to get back to peak employment for the country. It's a slow road out.
Yeah. Well, I think Florida, we're projecting it's going to be double-digit unemployment until 2012. And maybe not 2015, 2016 before we get back to the peak employment. Like Nevada, we had an incredible housing cycle and very sharp highs and very, very low lows.
It's going to create a long-term problem too. If you have people that have been unemployed for 3 or 4 years, even when the economy comes back, once you've been out of the labor market that long, it's hard to get back in.
Mm-hmm. Keith, Janet, Tom, Rich, I want to thank you all for joining us today on Money Talks America. We'll see you next time. Thank you.